Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. This afternoon, the Prime Minister broke his silence on Kashmir after 32 continuous days of curfew, 5,000 injured and nearly 60 killed. Mr. Modi spoke at a rally in Madhya Pradesh 24 hours after Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti met the Home and Defence Ministers and publicly said she wanted the Prime Minister to start a dialogue and take forward the process started by Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So tonight we ask, will the Prime Minister's speech make a difference? Or has he once again stressed development instead of political dialogue? Does he need to reach out to the separatists? And do we need an altogether new approach to the Kashmir issue? In part 2, I shall talk to two men whose knowledge and understanding of the valley is unparalleled. But first, I'm joined live from Srinagar by the Minister for Social Welfare, Science and Technology, Sajjad Lone. Sajjad Lone, before we come to the Prime Minister's speech today, let's start with the present unrest in the valley. For 32 days, large parts of the valley have been under curfew. There have been 58 deaths, over 5,000 injured, over 300 hit with pellets in the eye. Is the situation today worse than 2008 and 2010?
No, it's not. And let me tell you, this is not the first time that valley has closed down. Neither is it something that we have cooked up in the last 1.5 years. This is something very long term, has its roots back to decades, not even years. And at times they erupt. There is a feeling of anger. There is a trigger point. And then we, as state government, have to control the law and order situation. And we try our best. And at times we do fail, at times we succeed, to control the law and order in a manner that does not involve the loss of lives. But let me tell you, the discourse that has been started all across in the national media about it being as bad, as worse as 2008, 2010, the reality is, yes, we have had a lot of disturbance for the last 32 days, but there were worst periods, not only in 2008, not only in 2010, but even in the last 2 decades.
Okay.
But somehow, the discourse has focused on pellet guns. Now, let me, I really would want to put forward the government point of view. Take the pellet guns. Now, we've been elected by people. We're civilians. We are not security experts. I repeat, we are not security experts. Neither was the previous government, headed by National Conference and Congress. They, in their wisdom, also advised by the same security experts, decided that pellet guns were non-lethal. And so they purchased, I think they are 2011 or 12, pellet guns, 1,000 pellet guns, and that's what they bequeathed to us for crowd control in the belief that they are non-lethal. Now, in the middle of a very intense law and order problem, we found out they are not as non-lethal as we thought, and they're perhaps very lethal. Once this law and order, this current wave of unrest abates, I can assure you that the government will go around across every part of the world and find out which is the most benign and non-lethal way of controlling crowds.
But let me
and
put
I can
this
assure
to
you that we will implement that policy.
I take your point about wanting to use different instruments rather than the pellet guns because they are lethal and not non-lethal. But I want to quote to you something that an unnamed police officer said to the Economic Times yesterday. He said that security forces can only operate in South Kashmir during the night. He said that they are largely restricted to sanitizing the national highway. And then he said, and this time I'm quoting him, if you delete the main towns and cities from the map, the rest of Kashmir is a liberated zone, meaning it seems to be entirely in the hands of the protesters, not under the control of the state. Now, as a member of the government, is that an accurate description of the state of affairs, or is it exaggerated?
No, it's not, and even you know it's not. But to be very honest, now that we must have a good audience for India Today, quoting somebody anonymous, these anonymous quotes are wreaking havoc in mainland Kashmir. I really don't know what an anonymous quote really means. Unnamed police officer saying A, B, C, even if he's named, it hardly means anything. This does not reflect the situation on the ground.
So then tell me this, are there individuals or a group that are coordinating the present unrest which has continued for 30 days, or is it largely spontaneous and leaderless?
Look, I'll tell you a couple of things about this unrest. I'll try to be as truthful as possible and try to get across my point, because there are a lot of stories, counters, anyway. The first thing is that I don't want to belittle the anger on the streets. There is an anger on the streets, and I'll repeat, it's not something we have invented in the last 1.5 years. It was there, it will be there, it was there, it is there, and it will be there in the future, unless you don't have a long-term strategy to intervene structurally, politically, have an inclusive engagement, and ensure that this anger is mollified. If you don't do it, it's going to erupt again. Somebody else is going to face the wrath once again. Is it leaderless? I would not really say leaderless. There is a segment which is there, which are the separatists, and willy-nilly, whether they start it or not, they end up taking the ownership of any unrest, you could say, by default. Is it spontaneous? I can tell you nothing is spontaneous in Kashmir. That answers it all.
All right. Yesterday, Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti met the Home and Defence Ministers. She asked them to ask the Prime Minister to start a dialogue to take forward the process started by Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Today, at a rally in Alirajpur in Madhya Pradesh, the Prime Minister, for the first time in 32 days, spoke about Kashmir. He said, every Indian loves Kashmir. He said his government will do everything it can for Kashmir's development. And he said, some small handful of young Kashmiris had been misled. Now, was that the message Mehbooba Mufti was wanting to hear from Mr. Modi? Or has Mr. Modi stressed the old message of development rather than talking of political dialogue?
I don't think in any way that Ms. Mufti, our Honorable Chief Minister, wanted an entire discourse on Kashmir in one speech of the Prime Minister. Mr. Thapa, I've been wondering, in wonderment, for the last 30 days, the press was obsessed why the PM is not speaking. In 2010, this government, at that time, literally outsourced security activities to the Union Home Ministry, and the Home Secretary in Delhi would announce when curfew would be lifted and when it would be put in action. Now, the present government has had the magnanimity and the far-sightedness of not interfering and affording the due space to the state government to take its own actions in how to dealing with law and order. Now again, there was this huge debate, the Prime Minister is not opening his mouth. If he opens his mouth, then you say Delhi is dealing directly from Delhi, of course. If he doesn't, then you say, oh, they're not doing enough. The point is that Kashmir, as an issue, as a problem, has persisted, is an intractable problem for the last 6 decades. And one speech of the PM was in no way means to resolve it, to cater and address all dimensions. I'm sure, and I don't think, and I believe it's a very positive speech. He has tried to reach out, as much as is possible. And when you sit across the table and talk of development, talk of dialogue, talk of inclusive engagement, you won't be entering or sitting on the table with an agreement. You, of course, disagree. That's why you want to have a dialogue. Why do you want all agreements done before a dialogue is taking place?
So I get the impression from your answer that you're happy with what the Prime Minister said. You believe this was a good opening statement, and he said most of what you wanted him to say at this stage. Have I understood you correctly?
Mr. Thapar, in the context of 50 killings, you'll hardly find a Kashmiri who is happy, or there are not a lot of things which would make them happy. But I have the firm belief that the Prime Minister has the statesmanship and the far-sightedness, that in national interest, he will certainly look into and in fact, emulate what the previous BJP Prime Minister had done, is to address the structural aspects of the Kashmir dispute. You have to understand, and here I'm not being critical of the Congress, but what has happened that whenever, even in the worst adversity, you have an opportunity to study Kashmir. Because Mr. Thapa, in peacetime, when we Kashmiris come to Delhi and tell them there is a problem, most of you, and I'm not talking about you, but your fraternity and others, they feel that Kashmiris are acting pricey. Ye bhau badha rahe hain apna. That is the normal routine. Okay?
You know,
now, today in this time of adversity, just listen, please listen me out, I really want to speak to, is that you could actually have a chance to diagnose the disease. And unfortunately, whenever there's a chance to diagnose the disease, there are always people who create impediments. And today, this role is being played by the Congress.
Can I stop you there? Can I stop you? I don't think this is a moment for us to start playing polemics with Congress and BJP. Let's leave that aside. I think this is a chance to try and seriously talk about
Mr.
Kashmir.
Thapa, there is a problem. There is little.
Mr. Low.
Now, can I just add one thing? Why is there so little tolerance? Why is there so little tolerance in Delhi to hear the reality?
No, I'm very happy to hear the
reality.
reality.
There is a problem. Somebody has done it. Why don't you hold people accountable? Unless you don't hold people accountable, you don't tell them that why have you invested only in security measures in the last 30 years, 20 years and not invested in political measures? Why don't you want to listen to it?
I'll come to that in a moment's time.
When will you know about Kashmir if you don't want to listen to what happened?
You were
anyway.
You were comparing Mr. Modi to Atal Bihari Vajpayee. You were very glad that Mr. Modi was following in Mr. Vajpayee's steps, and Mr. Modi himself used phrases like Insaniyat, Jamhuriyat and Kashmiriyat, which were redolent of Mr. Vajpayee's rhetoric. But there's one thing Mr. Vajpayee did that Mr. Modi at the moment hasn't done. Mr. Vajpayee spoke to the separatists. His Deputy Prime Minister L.K. Advani formally sat down on 2 separate occasions with the Hurriyat. Mr. Vajpayee also attempted to speak with the Hizbul Mujahideen in the shape and form of Abdul Majid Dar. That is a step that Mr. Modi hasn't taken so far, from what one can tell. Do you believe Mr. Modi should follow in those footsteps as well?
You see, Mr. Modi will have to take his own decision. He is the Prime Minister of the country, but I can tell you that the state government would certainly encourage, would not only encourage, would be at the forefront, at the espousal of any dialogue which aims at inclusive engagement. That is something, and let me tell you one more thing. Mr. Modi will also have to restore the sanctity of the institution of dialogue, which has been eroded. You had a theatre of a quiet dialogue in the UPA regime, which was conspicuous by the absence of quietude, incidentally. In which we had a fatality, not a fatality, but he's been rendered, he is now bedridden since then. Nobody talked about. You see, the point you have to understand that
how do you restore the sanctity of dialogue?
Has been eroded.
Can you explain that to me? How should Mr. Modi restore the sanctity of dialogue?
To have an open-hearted dialogue with all sections, which is, with all sections, and I can tell you something, they have to reach out, not only to few individuals like me, but to the people of the Kashmir. It's a reality that they feel isolated, they feel far away, good or bad, whatever they think. It's something they need to resolve. Make peace with the people of Kashmir.
Mr. Lone,
you can't obviously have dialogue with the entire people of Kashmir.
The agenda for alliance formally commits the government both in Delhi and Srinagar to talking to all stakeholders, including the Hurriyat. That agenda for alliance is now 18 months old, but that reaching out, that formal talking to stakeholders hasn't happened.
I really think it's late. They should do it. We would all encourage, and I hope they will do it. And I hope that they will do it, and hopefully in a very credible and a dignified manner.
Are there differences between your BJP partners and the PDP in the cabinet that is holding back this element of the agenda for alliance being fulfilled? Are there internal differences that are holding it back?
My hand on my heart, none.
So then why has that critical part of the agenda for alliance not been fulfilled for 18 months?
Well, I'm sure it will be fulfilled. This agenda of alliance is there for 18 months, out of which you have to understand that a good 3, 4, 5 months, first because of the untimely death of Mufti Saab, and then the spell of governor's rule, it got discontinued. I'm sure that it will be pursued in the future, and we're all out for engagement. And let me tell you that, in the absence of engagement, the other alternative to resolve conflicts is violence. And the best way to keep violence out is to follow the alternative mode, the civilized non-violent method of
I take that point very well.
Which is
Now,
sitting across the table.
tell me something.
Disagree.
Mehbooba Mufti was in Delhi yesterday. It was widely believed and expected she would meet the Prime Minister before she returned, but she didn't. Why did she not meet the Prime Minister given that she was in Delhi? Or is it that the Prime Minister simply couldn't find time for her?
Because I'm sure Miss Mufti is, wants to do what she wants to do, and would not, that she's not captive to the expectations what the media thinks in Delhi. It's perfectly normal. I don't know why you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Why she did not meet him or why she did not. I'm sure she had a program charted out and knew what she was doing. If somebody had expectations that she would be meeting the Prime Minister, means that that person's expectations were not realistic, and that he would make amends in the future and be realistic about his or her expectations. Why ask this question to Ms. Mufti? You have to ask this question to those who have unrealistic expectations.
One last question before I let you go, Mr. Lone. The attitude of successive governments since 1947 to the problem of Kashmir has been to treat it by and large as a law and order situation. As a result of which, periodically unrest keeps flaring up in the valley. It then gets damped down. 3 years later, it flares up again. Are we making a mistake in the way we handle Kashmir? Are we wrong to treat it as a law and order issue rather than respond to the alienation the people feel? And is that the change that needs to happen if we are going to, in a long-term way, solve the problem?
Well, that's exactly what I was trying to tell you when you interrupted me last time, is that this is not something we invented in the last 1.5 years. Its roots can be traced back to the last 4 or 5 decades. And whether you like it or not, the reality is that a particular political party has been at the helm of affairs for the last 60 years, who have invested totally in the security aspects. All interventions have been operational, which is army, police, BSF, blah, blah, whatever. The structural intervention, reaching out to people, inclusive engagement, which would have meant rehabilitation, reconciliation, reintegration of those who said bid goodbye to violence. None of that has happened. They have put all the eggs in one basket, and I can tell you that this is a very, very dangerous policy. I hope, because you see what happens now when that same party is in opposition, the discourse is being disfigured, misconstrued totally in Delhi, and which is dangerous, which is very dangerous.
Can I put
the party which hanged Afzal
Can I put to you what PC Chidambaram said to me?
But can I put to you one thing? You don't seem to be in a mood to listen anyway.
Because I think it's more important to look forward than to look backwards. PC Chidambaram, in an interview to me right at the end of last month, said that the key problem that had gone wrong was that India had gone back or betrayed the grand bargain by which Kashmir acceded to India in 47. His words were, we broke our promises, we failed to keep faith. And he said the solution now is to try and roll back as far as practicable and possible to the terms of accession in 47. How do you respond to that?
Oh, I'm happy to hear it from Mr. Chidambaram, who will go down in history as one of the most arrogant home ministers, who had total disdain and contempt for Kashmiris when he was the home minister, who had absolutely no sympathy for them. I really, there was an element of me which was overjoyed when I heard him speak to you, and I also want to hit the roof. Is this guy, when he was the home minister, he had nothing but pellet guns. That's what he gave to them. This is the problem. When in opposition, they all of a sudden discover things which they don't when they are in power. Or jo aap bolte hain, let us look forward. Let me tell you one thing. Forward, your solution in forward will only be there if you visit backward. Your problem is, and I'm talking of the discourse, is to look at quick fix solutions. They're not there. Go into the roots, the structural aspects of the problem, and you will find a solution. Quick fixes, this is not McDonald's instant food. You have to go down to the roots.
You're absolutely right, Sajjad. Kashmir has a history that mustn't be forgotten, and if you forget that history, you'll never sort out the problem. But it's not an easy issue. My thanks to you for agreeing to join me. Joining me now are two men whose understanding of Kashmir is unparalleled. former head of RNAW, A.S. Dullat, and former Divisional Commissioner Kashmir and former Chairman of the Minorities Commission, Wajahat Habibullah. Mr. Dullat, let's start with the Prime Minister's speech. In your assessment, has he stressed enough on dialogue? Because I know he mentioned the word dialogue. Or do you think that the overall impact was to talk about some small minority being misguided and misled, and then a bigger stress on development?
I think let's look at it like this, that at long last he has spoken about Kashmir. I think that's the way Umar Abdullah reacted, that the Prime Minister has spoken on Kashmir. Better late than never, however little it might mean. But also it gives, I think, poor Mehbooba a clutch, something to go back to the valley with, because she's really had a rough time. Whenever anything like this happens in Kashmir, things get out of hand, Delhi is first to blame. And then come its stooges in the valley. And right now, Mehbooba is reckoned to be Delhi's stooge. So she's not the kind of leader that the PDP was hoping for. And it's been a very rough 3 months for her. So that's the way it is. The situation is bad, it's sad, it's depressing, and it looks out of control. The worst thing is, I mean, the way I look at it is that we seem to have lost our emotional bond to Kashmir and Kashmiris.
Wajahat Habibullah, let me put, in a sense, the same question to you. Has the Prime Minister hit the right notes to have the impact on the young in Kashmir who are out there protesting? And secondly, do you have any idea of how they've responded to his speech, or is it too early to tell?
Well, it's a little early to tell. I haven't gone on the Facebook to correspond with my young people who I am in correspondence with, so I can't tell you what their reaction will be, but I can tell you their reaction would not have been very enthusiastic, because you have to understand the context in which it has been put. But I would say that he has reached out, whether he said dialogue, whether he said whatever, he has gestured that he has reached out. It would have, of course, been better had this happened in Kashmir, had the speech made from Madhya Pradesh savours of that kind of speech of P.V. Narasimha Rao, when he reached out to the people of J&K from Burkina Faso. But when he, you remember his famous speech, "The sky is the limit." But with those limitations, it is certainly a positive development. And I would agree with my friend Bubbles, with whom, of course, I have worked in the past so closely on this whole issue, that it now depends on how this is actually acted upon. What does it mean? Because Bubbles he's written about it in his Vajpayee years. I was closely associated with that whole initiative in the time of Vajpayee. I was also very closely associated with Mr. Chidambaram's initiative. So I am a kind of thread that ties
absolutely.
But I can tell you, and I have written of it.
I accept you're a thread, but let's come to the present rather than the past. A lot depends upon what the PM now does to actually make concrete the verbal reaching up. Do you believe he needs to follow in Mr. Vajpayee's footsteps when it comes to talking to the separatists? Mr. Vajpayee, as I pointed out to Sajjad, was also prepared to talk to Hizbul Mujahideen in the shape of Abdul Majid Dar. Perhaps Mr. Modi won't go that far, but does he need to start talking to the Hurriyat?
Of course he needs to start talking to the Hurriyat. You know, if we go back to Mr. Modi's election, and he came in with a thumping majority in Parliament, Vajpayee didn't have that kind of majority. He had to deal with some 24 parties or whatever. And when he got elected, it was welcomed everywhere, including Kashmir, and the Mirwais welcomed his election. And he thought, well, he will follow in Vajpayee's footsteps. In fact, during his campaign in Jammu, he did talk about Vajpayee and Insaniyat and Jamhuriyat and Kashmiriyat. But after that, it was forgotten.
And you see, the question is, when I asked you, should he follow Mr. Vajpayee and talk to the Hurriyat and the separatists, you said, of course.
There is no other way.
But remember what Mr. Modi did in August 2014 when the Pakistan High Commissioner met Hurriyat before he was supposedly going to meet our Foreign Secretary. Mr. Modi came down very upset. After that, how easy would it be for Mr. Modi to almost do a U-turn to talk to the separatists now?
I don't know about a U-turn. I don't think we should ever have made that meeting with the Pakistanis an issue, because it goes back, as far as I remember, to Narasimha Rao's time. And it was Prime Minister Narasimha Rao who said, let's stop getting excited about the Hurriyat visiting the Pakistan High Commission or whatever. Let them go wherever they want to go.
This is why I'm asking. So is it now going to be easy for Mr. Modi to talk to separatists after the position he took in 2014?
Well, let his government start talking. Let something start happening, because there is no other way. You have to talk. And let me add, you have to talk to Pakistan as well. Not talking to Pakistan again, to me, makes no sense.
Now,
also, sorry to interrupt you, but you know, when we don't talk to Pakistan and we don't talk to Kashmir and Kashmiris, that is when you have trouble in the valley.
You know, Wajad Habibullah, speaking in Parliament yesterday, Ghulam Nabi Azad, who's not just leader of the opposition but a former chief minister of the state, said that the time had come for the Prime Minister to send an all-party delegation to Kashmir. The problem is, the last time there was trouble in 2010, an all-party delegation was sent. It led to the setting up of the interlocutors, but the report the interlocutors gave the UPA government was literally put on a shelf and not acted upon at all. As a result of which, Omar Abdullah said to me just 2 weeks ago that if a second all-party delegation comes now, it would be viewed in Kashmir as a gimmick and not meaningful. He said even he himself might not talk to them because he could see no point. So how do you respond to the Azad suggestion? Is this a good idea and time to send an all-party delegation as a way of starting some sort of dialogue, or is it now too little too late?
It would be a gesture. It would at least show that the country, the parties in Parliament are united in seeking the welfare of the people of Kashmir. But the point is, I do not think it can be the basis of anything further, not beyond that. And I was telling you that I have been in correspondence when this matter was first raised in Parliament. The overall reaction from within Kashmir, from all these young people, was that it will be pointless. That has no meaning at all. But the point is that that young people, their thinking has gone very far. It is not now a question of coming to terms. That is what is making me so desperate. You are talking in terms of opening a dialogue with the Hurriyat. Yes, a dialogue with the Hurriyat would be necessary. A dialogue with Pakistan, as Babu says, would be necessary. But the whole situation has gone well beyond that. There's a whole new generation. The Hurriyat leadership itself is a past generation. There is a whole new generation that has come up now. And I'm afraid that we've lost that generation.
Can I ask you this then?
We have got to seek openings with that generation, and that opening will come from political leaders.
Can I ask you this? As you said, there's a whole new generation. How do we find an opening to people we don't have any contact with? Worse still, how do we find an opening to a protest movement that is probably leaderless and spontaneous?
How we found an opening with the Hurriyat leadership. Babus was a person. I was there involved. R.K. Singh was doing this in the time of Mr. Vajpayee. How did we find the opening? By reaching out.
But who do you reach out to now?
Naturally.
But who do you reach out to now? It's leaderless and spontaneous.
But he should approach. There are many people. There are many people. You move to the, and that was what the interlocutors were appointed for, but they failed to do it. You need to go out to the towns, you need to go out to the villages, meet the local leadership which has emerged there. It is there. I'm in correspondence. I mean, they are on. I see their correspondence on Facebook. I often get abused by them. I have been abused by them. The question is that they are there.
Okay.
It is easy today to reach out to them.
Well, you've heard Wajad Habibullah say it's easy today to reach out to them. There are many others who say that actually it's very difficult because this is a new generation. We have no contact with them. The movement is spontaneous and leaderless. It's dispersed as well. You've been there and you were head of RANAW, which means that you know how one attempts to reach out. Is it much more difficult this time around?
I think it is more difficult. Wajad, of course, knows Kashmir better than me, but he's also a little more idealistic. It's not so easy to reach out to, just boys in the street. But what is always available is the Kashmiri leadership. I would say, why don't we start by talking to the mainstream? There are 4 or 5 mainstream parties in J&K. Why don't we get them together and talk and have a dialogue like Ghulam Nabi Azad has suggested? And then we have to move beyond that. The Hurriyat is there, it is available, and I don't believe that the Kashmiri leaders are not prepared to talk. I've never known of a time when the Kashmiris are not prepared to talk. They're always prepared
So
to
you're
talk.
saying when you start a process, eventually you will find a way of reaching out to them because they themselves will also be keen to be talked to.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So the key is starting that process quickly.
Quickly, and start with the mainstream and simultaneously move on to the separatists. You see, now you had Sajjad on the air, very interesting. I think he's been a friend, a youngster, I think with a lot of future. But how fast he's got mainstreamed, you know. I think the other separatists should learn a lesson from him.
But tell me this, there was a sentence in Mr. Modi's speech today where he talked of dialogue, he talked about talking and democracy. Is that his subtle way of suggesting he's prepared to have a dialogue? Because a lot of the rest of what he said, to be honest, was not about dialogue, it was about development, it was about putting funds in, it was about finding jobs. But that is something the Kashmiris may not respond to today.
See, let's talk about development first. Development, I would say, is today too little too late. Because when Kashmir was crying for development and help, and after the floods, nothing was done immediately. And today, I think development is meaningless. In any case, Kashmir is not an economic issue. It's a political issue. It's an emotive issue. And therefore, you need to reach out to the Kashmiris.
But that sense that it's a political and emotive issue didn't seem to come through clearly from Mr. Modi's statement. What came through was the need for development and jobs.
But the very fact that I think he mentioned Insaniyat and Jamhuriyat and Kashmiriyat possibly is a hint that...
those are code words, in other words.
Those are code words, yes. Those are
good
good
words. Let me put this to you, Wajahat Habibullah. One of the key commitments made in the Agenda for Alliance, and it's made explicitly, is that the government both in Delhi and in Srinagar will talk to all stakeholders, and Hurriyat is mentioned. But 18 months have gone by, that hasn't happened. And even Sajjad alone, for all that he was supporting his own government in every other respect, but on this, he had to accept that progress hadn't been made, although he kept insisting it will be made. Or he kept hoping it will be made. But given if on that key item of the Agenda for Alliance progress hasn't been made, how hopeful are you now that there will be meaningful political and emotional dialogue rather than a stress on development?
Well, you see, the point is that, as you rightly say, that this dialogue had not opened. When just after the election, I happened to have called on the young Mirwais, and he'd spoken very hopefully of a dialogue opening at that time. He'd been obviously felt reassured that there would be. The fact of Sajjad actually joining politics, and Sajjad is such a good friend of mine, and as of course Bubbles will know, I used to go and speak to his father, who was of course such a dear...
Come back to the point, Wajahat Habibullah. Let's not get lost in your reminiscences of the past.
Sort of model. But the point is, yes, I'm now coming, but I'm saying that this was the atmosphere then. The point is, and I agree with Bubbles, that it's not going to be easy to open a dialogue with the people, with the public, as I say. Why? Because at that time, the parties concerned were willing to open dialogue. So I would agree with Bubbles that let us first open a dialogue with those who are willing. And we have an instrument, as I said, you have Sajjad inside the government, who can be an instrument to reopen that kind of dialogue. But the problem that we are going to face is that the young people who I'm talking of having lost, they have nothing but hatred for people like me. For people like me, they have nothing but hatred. Today.
In which case, this is the problem. You're underlining the problem. Reaching out to them is not going to be easy.
It's going to be very difficult.
And therefore, what would be your advice to Mr. Modi about how he should do it?
No. But we have to. There is no alternative. Because without them, we have no future.
Okay. Let me put this to you. One of the anomalies is that the Chief Minister was in Delhi yesterday. It was widely expected she would meet the Prime Minister. She met the Home Minister and Defence Minister and sent a message to the PM through them. But she didn't meet the PM. And now she's a chief minister of a critical state, which has perhaps one of its worst crises happening, and she doesn't meet the PM, although she's in the same city. What do you make of that?
I think it's a little unfortunate, because it's not a big deal either way, whether she met or she didn't meet. But for people back home, again, you know, it's another this thing of skepticism that Delhi, you know, it's Delhi's arrogance. They don't care, they don't bother. The Prime Minister couldn't find time. There may have been other reasons. Maybe Mehbooba didn't have time, whatever it is. But she needs to explain this, having gone back to the valley. And she should say she came back satisfied, or whatever it is, because she's really in the firing line there. I think the PDP is
One last question on Mehbooba Mufti. She's new and she's clearly not her father.
No.
Has she got it in her to handle this crisis?
Well, I thought she had, but you know, I think again, she's, let me put it like this, that Delhi is very happy with her, and that's not a good sign in Kashmir.
That in fact undermines her in Kashmiri eyes.
Yes, yes, yes.
You're also suggesting that she's seen, and you said this as much,
Yes.
she's seen as the stooge of Delhi.
Stooge of Delhi,
So that means that at this critical moment, she may not be the right chief minister.
No, I won't say that, but
You're suggesting it.
what I'm saying is that she's having a very tough time, and so is the PDP. The PDP is very rapidly on the decline, and Sajjad said there are no differences between the BJP and the PDP, maybe not in the cabinet, but in the party, there are very sharp differences in the PDP. And that's well known.
And that's handicapping Mehbooba as well.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
So what you're saying is that given Mr. Modi's possible reluctance to talk to the separatists, and given the problem of reaching out to this leaderless...
Let's hope that they are going to talk to the
But
separatists.
given that reluctance, and given the problem of reaching out to a leaderless protest movement, and given the way Mehbooba Mufti herself is handicapped and viewed in the valley, it's not going to be an easy situation to tackle.
I think for a start, they should support Mehbooba so long as she's chief minister as much as they can. Delhi needs to fully support Mehbooba.
You mean they need to do it more obviously and more publicly?
Much more obviously, much more publicly, because Delhi is quite happy with Mehbooba.
In which case, not meeting Mehbooba was not the right thing to do.
It was unfortunate, yeah, I would say it was
because that would have sent a message of support.
Right.
Not meeting her raises question marks.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
So they need
It's
to
sad.
think. They need to think very deeply about how they're handling this situation.
Yeah, just a meeting with the Home Minister, the Defence Minister, I think she deserved little more than that.
All right, let's leave it there. My thanks to you for coming to studio. My thanks also to Wajat Habibullah for joining us. And earlier, my thanks to Sajjad Lone, who spoke to us from Srinagar. If you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.
Thank you.